Zheng He was born in 1371 in the Yunnan province, at the time under Mongolian rule. He was raised a Muslim. Both Zheng He's father and grandfather did the lengthy pilgrimage from their homeland to Mecca in the Arabian Peninsula. Their travels and their stories aroused Zheng He's interests in other lands. In 1381, the armed forces of the Chinese emperor invaded Yunnan, and in the turmoil of the war, Zheng He's father was killed, and Zheng He himself captured when he was only 10 years old. He was sent to Nanjing to serve in Prince Chu Di's household. When Chu Di became emperor, he almost immediately began a variety of ambitious projects, like the relocation of the Chinese capital to Beijing. He built what is known today as the enormous compound of the Forbidden City, which spans over 1,600,000 square feet. He also decided to protect his empire by restoring the Chinese Wall, which had been neglected by his predecessors, and to revive trade by repairing the channel that connected the north of China with its southern parts. One of his largest achievements, however, was the massive effort he invested in building a giant fleet. Within 3 years, the emperor added 1,681 vessels to the original fleet, as well as 250 nine-mast treasure ships, 1,350 patrol ships, 400 warships, and 400 freighters to transport food and animals. The resources used could have easily been put to work in a giant military machinery that could have defeated and conquered most of its neighbors. Colonization would have added to China's wealth and power. However, the ruler of China did not understand his mission as such. Instead, he developed plans to use the fleets to travel and to chart maps. He intended to increase trade, scientific and cultural encounter and exchange by sending scholars and merchants and receiving their foreign counterparts from abroad. As the representative of the heavens on earth, the role of a Chinese emperor was traditionally the role of one who preserved the balance of forces around him in order to maintain harmony. Violence that comes with conquest destroys this fragile equilibrium and ultimately causes loss and suffering. This mindset, favoring collaboration over confrontation, went in line with Zheng He's own beliefs. As a Muslim, he had been taught that the middle path is a general principle of behavior. He was raised to treat the poor kindly, to extend his hand to those in need, and to oppose social injustice. This, paired with his willingness to serve the emperor to his best abilities, enabled him to achieve the difficult goal of forming alliances with faraway nations. As a young adult, Zheng He was said to have been impressively tall, about 6.5 feet. Under the prince's guardianship, he had learned how to fight in the military. Over time, he had also become a very close confidant of the prince, so when the latter became the emperor of China, he promoted Zheng He because of his well-known honest personality and good judgment. This would mark the start of his 7 voyages, a lifelong of traveling. On his first journey, Zheng He commanded an impressive fleet of 317 600-foot-long ships, 60 of them famous huge treasure ships, and over 28,000 men. Many of them were soldiers for protection, but his crew also contained significant amounts of diplomatic and medical personnel, as well as astronomers and scholars of many specialities, also of Islam. It is notable that in terms of today's standards, this was an enormous mobilization of human work power and equipment. The Ba'ushwan, or treasure ships of China, had 9 masts that were located on 400 feet decks. They were considered the largest wooden ships built of their time, which caused the ships later sailed by the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama to dwarf in comparison, as well as the Santa Maria of Columbus, which was only 85 feet long. The mission of this impressive fleet was to honor the allies and vassal states of the Chinese Empire with an exchange of gifts and to foster the diplomatic ties of friendship and mutual understanding. Another more noble goal was to gather and exchange knowledge and information. Generally, military force was only used for self-defense or to resolve cases of infringement on others' rights. For example, in Sumatra, on his way to India, he used the power of his fleet to take down a pirate chief who was terrorizing the people of the region. On his return, Chu Di was very pleased and entrusted Zheng He with his next mission to Malaysia. When he arrived at Malacca, he traded his goods and took new merchandise and merchants on board for China. Malacca had a significant Muslim population, and Zheng He supported them by helping them erect mosques and organizing their community, leaving some of the scholars he brought with them. When he heard that the people of Malacca were being threatened by Siam, modern-day Thailand, he decided to use his power to protect them. During his extensive travels, Zheng He would encounter a multitude of different cultures and beliefs. He would demonstrate a high degree of cultural sensitivity and diplomatic skills, which enabled him to establish alliances and friendships between people and nations. In Cambodia, amazed by the local architectural style, he built the Wat Noker Temple in Kampong Chwang to honor the emperor. Although a Muslim himself, he did not hesitate to donate to the local people, temples, and shrines for the worship of their own religion in honor of the emperor, as gifts to the locals or as symbols of gratefulness for their successful journey of his non-Muslim crew. Soon, his fleet traveled to Calicut, modern-day India. He arrived at night in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, where he met Alagonakara, the king of Sri Lanka, who refused to pay his tributes to the Chinese emperor but invited Zheng He to the palace. Alagonakara had a plan. He plotted to trap Zheng He in his castle while attacking and taking over his fleet. Zheng He, however, anticipated Alagonakara's plan and took him prisoner. Consequently, the attack on the fleet failed. Alagonakara lost his throne and was taken to the Chinese emperor for further judgment. The third journey on December 12, 1410, led to Hormuz, an island located near Iran. From there, Zheng He continued to Tanzania, Africa, from where he bought a quaint and precious gift for the emperor, a giraffe. This would be the first voyage Ma Huan would join. He was an interpreter for Arabic and a Muslim convert who later became known for the detailed documentation of his travels. He wrote the book Zheng He Shenglen, which is considered by sinologists worldwide as a primary source for the history of the Ming Dynasty's naval exploration. In his fourth and fifth voyage, he stopped by Iran and possibly made the Muslim pilgrimage from there to Saudi Arabia. He traded with African countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. On the sixth journey, Zheng He returned all the foreign ambassadors back to their home countries. On his seventh journey, he is said to have died in Calicut, India. Wherever he went, Zheng He left many marks of influence on the local populations. In Kenya, a tribe called the Famao claimed Chinese lineage. In Indonesia, Zheng He's memory is revered in the Buddhist temples of Tekakse and Sampangkong. In Malaysia, another population is said to go back to the marriage of a Ming princess, Hanlei Po, to the Sultan Mansur Shah. The intermarriage of her entourage with the Moluccans resulted in a population referring to themselves as the Baba and Nyonya. The Cultural Museum of Zheng He in Malacca honors the significant contributions of Zheng He to the rise of the Malaccan Empire. Islam had started to spread in Southeast Asia a few hundred years before through trade relations with Arabia and India. His support of the continued growth of the Chinese Muslim communities in the Palembang and Java, the Malay Peninsula and the Philippines is documented in the local architecture of mosques and memorials. Several steles have been discovered in China, one in Taijing and one in Nanjing. The first was named Deed of Foreign Connection and Exchange, while the second one contains an account of Zheng He's mission. We have traversed over 100,000 li of vast ocean, and have beheld great ocean waves, rising as high as the sky and swelling endlessly. As Schwanguto, a history professor and scholar, remarked, the Europeans started a storm of blood with their long voyages, robbing and pillaging along the way. Zheng He was fundamentally different from them. As an admiral, diplomat, soldier, and trader, Zheng He is a giant of Chinese and Muslim history. Almost a century before Columbus, at a time when China was the richest and most advanced country in the world, Zheng He sailed further than anyone before him, at the head of an armada bigger than the combined fleets of all Europe. It is undisputed that his encounters contributed heavily to the creation of new navigational maps and the spread of Chinese culture. Sadly, a sharp political change in China caused the massive legacy of Zheng He to be abandoned, and nobody continued his mission. In China, however, historians have just begun to unearth Zheng He's memory, and to give him the place that he deserves as the powerful but peaceful explorer and facilitator for the exchange between faiths, culture, and nations he was.